My wife told me she doesn't have to cook, clean, or even sleep with me. And honestly, that single sentence ended our marriage right there in the living room on a Wednesday night, while her friend Claire sat on our couch eating takeout I paid for. I'm Brad, 32, and what I'm about to tell you is how a 7-year marriage can collapse in slow motion while you're too busy being a good husband to notice it's happening. This isn't about one big betrayal or some dramatic affair. This is about something way more insidious, about how a partner can slowly stop being a partner while you're still showing up every single day doing all the work. It started so gradually I didn't even see it coming, like watching paint dry or a plant die from neglect, except the plant was our relationship and I was the only one watering it. Mia and I met back in 2016 at a mutual friend's barbecue. One of those easy summer afternoons where everything feels possible and the future looks bright. She was funny, spontaneous, always up for an adventure. And for the first few years of our marriage, we were solid. We adopted our dog Bailey together, a goofy golden retriever who became our kid before we ever talked about having actual kids. We'd take road trips on weekends, try new restaurants, stay up late talking about our dreams. I genuinely felt like we were building something meaningful together. I worked in IT consulting, she worked in marketing for a local firm, and we both contributed to the household in different ways. I handled most of the cooking because I actually enjoyed it. She'd do the grocery shopping and meal planning. I'd take care of home repairs and car maintenance. She'd manage our social calendar and keep us connected with friends and family. It felt balanced. It felt like teamwork. It felt like an actual partnership where both people were invested in making life work. But somewhere around year 5, things started shifting in ways I couldn't quite put my finger on at first. Mia stopped asking about my day, stopped planning those weekend adventures, stopped putting effort in literally anything that involved us as a couple. At first, I chalked it up to work stress or just the natural flow of a long-term relationship. Everyone goes through phases, right? But this wasn't a phase. She'd come home from work, immediately get on her phone, scroll through social media for hours, and barely acknowledge I existed unless she needed something. The apartment started getting messier because she'd stopped doing her share of the cleaning. Bailey started getting walked less frequently because she couldn't be bothered, and our intimate life went from regular and connected to practically non-existent. I tried talking to her about it multiple times, asking if something was wrong, if there was anything I could do to help, if she was unhappy or depressed or just going through something. But she'd brush me off with vague responses about being tired or stressed or needing space. Then Claire entered the picture, and everything got exponentially worse. Claire was Mia's coworker turned best friend, a recently divorced woman in her early 30s who had a lot of opinions about relationships, and none of them were good. I'm not saying Claire was the sole cause of our marriage falling apart, but she was definitely the accelerant on a fire that was already smoldering. Suddenly, Claire was parroting all these phrases about emotional labor and mental load and how women don't owe their husbands anything. And look, I'm all for women having autonomy and not being treated like housekeepers, but the way Claire framed everything was so toxic and one-sided, it was insane. Every conversation became about how men are incompetent, how husbands should be grateful their wives tolerate them, how women need to prioritize themselves and stop catering to male expectations. Mia started spending 3 or 4 nights a week hanging out with Claire, going to bars, attending these women's empowerment meetups that seemed less about actual empowerment and more about complaining about their partners. The more time Mia spent with Claire, the less she contributed to our household, and the more she seemed to resent me for existing. I'd come home to a trashed apartment, dishes piled in the sink, Bailey's food bowl empty, laundry overflowing, and Mia would be on the couch scrolling through her phone like none of it was her responsibility. I'd ask her if she could maybe take Bailey out, since I'd been at work all day and had to jump on an evening call, and she'd sigh dramatically like I'd asked her to climb Mount Everest. I'd suggest we cook dinner together like we used to, and she'd tell me she already ate with Claire or wasn't hungry, or I could just order something if I wanted food.
Every single household task, every bit of emotional labor, every ounce of effort to maintain our relationship and our home fell entirely on me. And when I tried to address it, she'd hit me with phrases straight from Claire's playbook about how I was being controlling or demanding or not respecting her boundaries. The breaking point came on a Wednesday night when I got home from work around 7 to find our apartment looking like a disaster zone and Mia sitting on the couch with Claire, both of them laughing at something on Claire's phone while surrounded by empty takeout containers. Bailey was whining by his empty food bowl. There were clothes scattered across the floor. The kitchen was a wreck. And I'd had the kind of day where you just want to come home to some basic sense of order and partnership. I didn't even say anything confrontational. I just asked Mia if she'd had a chance to feed Bailey or start any laundry since she'd gotten home before me. And Claire immediately jumped in with his condescending laugh about how I sounded like I was talking to a maid. Mia didn't defend me, didn't tell her friend to back off. She just sat there nodding along while Claire went on this rant about how Mia didn't sign up to be my servant and I needed to manage my own expectations. I stayed calm. I said I wasn't asking her to be a servant, but we're married and we live together, and taking care of our dog in our home is a shared responsibility. And that's when Mia looked me dead in the eye and said it. She said she doesn't have to cook, clean, or even sleep with me, that those aren't requirements of marriage, that I needed to stop acting entitled to her time and energy. Claire was grinning like she just won some kind of victory, and I realized in that moment that I wasn't in a marriage anymore. I was in a one-sided arrangement where I did everything and got treated like the bad guy for expecting basic reciprocity. That night, after Mia told me she didn't have to do anything for me, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to take her completely at her word and stop being the partner she'd already stopped being for me. I didn't announce it dramatically or have some big confrontation. I just quietly stopped doing every single thing I'd been doing to hold our household and our marriage together. I woke up, got ready for work, and left without feeding Bailey, without making coffee, without tidying up the living room like I usually did. And I felt this strange sense of clarity wash over me. If Mia genuinely believed she had no obligations to me as a spouse, then I had no obligations to her either. And I was curious to see how long it would take for her to realize what she'd actually been taking for granted all these years.
The first few days were almost fascinating to watch, in a completely depressing way. Bailey started whining more because his feeding schedule got messed up, and Mia kept forgetting to fill his bowl or take him out on time. The apartment descended into chaos faster than I expected. Dishes piled up until there were literally no clean plates left. Trash overflowed because I stopped taking it out. Laundry sat in heaps because I stopped doing loads that included her clothes. Our bathroom sink started draining slowly and then stopped draining at all. One of those annoying clogs that I would have normally fixed in 10 minutes with a drain snake and some cleaner, but I just left it. Mia texted me at work, asking if I could pick up groceries on my way home, and I replied that I'd grab food for myself, but she'd need to handle her own shopping. She tried calling the landlord about the sink, and got frustrated when they said it wasn't their responsibility and she'd need to hire a plumber herself, something she'd apparently never had to do because it always handled every single home repair issue that came up. I stopped cooking entirely, started meal prepping only for myself on Sundays, kept my food separate in the fridge with my name on everything. Mia would come home expecting dinner like she had for 7 years and find me eating my prepared meals while she scrambled to figure out what to order or make for herself. She couldn't cook beyond basic pasta, and even that she'd managed to mess up half the time, burning things or under-seasoning everything or forgetting ingredients. I watched her try to make chicken one night, and she didn't even know what temperature to set the oven to, had to Google it on her phone, while Claire texted her supportive messages about how cooking is a patriarchal expectation. Anyway, the apartment started smelling weird because trash wasn't getting taken out regularly and dishes weren't getting washed, and I could see Mia getting more stressed and overwhelmed, but I didn't step in to help because why would I? She made it abundantly clear she didn't see household contribution as part of marriage. About 2 weeks into my experiment, Mia tried to initiate intimacy for the first time in months, came into the bedroom wearing lingerie she must have dug out from the back of her drawer, trying to be seductive and reconnect physically.
I looked at her and calmly reminded her that she'd said she doesn't have to sleep with me, and that works both ways. I don't have to sleep with her either. The look on her face was somewhere between shock and genuine hurt, like she'd never considered that her words could be applied in reverse. She assumed physical intimacy was something she controlled completely and could use as leverage or reward. I told her I wasn't interested in pity, affection, or transactional physical connection. That if she wanted an actual intimate relationship, she needed to show up as an actual partner first. And then I rolled over and went to sleep. She didn't try again after that, but I could tell it messed with her psychologically. The rejection hit different when it came from someone who'd always been available and willing. The financial separation was where things got really interesting and really ugly. I've been covering probably 70% of our household expenses for years. Not because we'd agreed to that split, but because Mia spent money carelessly and had always just quietly made up the difference. To keep us afloat, I opened a separate checking account, calculated exactly half of rent and utilities and shared expenses, and told Mia she needed to start contributing her actual fair share. She was shocked when she saw the numbers, genuinely seemed to have no concept of how much I'd been subsidizing her lifestyle. All the dinners out with Claire and the online shopping and the subscription services that I've been paying for while she spent her paycheck on whatever she wanted. I canceled her access to my credit cards, removed her from my streaming accounts, stopped paying for her car insurance and her phone bill, told her she was an adult with a job and she could handle her own financial responsibilities. Mia panicked hard when she realized she couldn't actually afford her current lifestyle on just her income, started complaining that I was being cruel and petty and financially abusive, throwing around terms she'd clearly picked up from Claire without understanding what they actually meant. I pointed out that expecting your spouse to subsidize your life while contributing nothing in return is closer to financial abuse than asking someone to pay their fair share, and she didn't have a response to that. She had to cut back on her nights out with Claire, had to cancel some of her subscription boxes, had to actually look at her bank account and budget like a responsible adult, and she hated every second of it.
Claire kept telling her I was being controlling and she should leave me. But Claire also wasn't offering to help pay Mia's bills. Funny how that works. Around week 3, Mia completely switched tactics and started trying to win me back, through sudden niceness and effort. She'd try to cook dinner for both of us, and it would be a disaster. She'd attempt to clean the apartment, but only do a surface job that missed all the actual problems. She'd suggest date nights and activities, like we were a normal couple just going through a rough patch. I could see right through it, because none of it addressed the actual issues. She wasn't trying to rebuild our partnership or have genuine conversations about what went wrong. She was just trying to get me back into my role of handling everything while she coasted. I told her point blank that she wasn't trying to fix us. She was trying to save her comfort, trying to get back the personal assistant and ATM and emotional support system she'd been taking for granted while giving nothing in return. The final straw came about a month into all this when I had lunch with my buddy Marcus, who'd gone through a divorce 2 years earlier. He told me about his lawyer, Lisa, how she'd helped him navigate everything cleanly and fairly. And something clicked in my head that this marriage was already over. I was just going through the motions of proving a point that didn't need proving anymore. I made an appointment with Lisa for that Friday, took a long lunch break from work, sat in her office, and laid out the whole situation. She listened carefully, took notes, asked questions about our assets and debts and living situation, and then looked at me and asked if I was sure this was what I wanted. I thought about it for maybe 5 seconds and said yes, I was done.
Lisa drew up the initial paperwork over the next week. Separation agreement and petition for divorce. Division of assets. That was straightforward, since we didn't have kids or own property together. I picked up the documents on a Tuesday afternoon, brought them home that evening, and found Mia on the couch scrolling through her phone. Like always, I handed her the manila envelope without ceremony, told her she should probably read it, and watched her face go through about 5 different emotions as she pulled out the papers and realized what she was looking at. She asked if I was serious, if this was some kind of manipulation tactic or power play, and I told her I'd never been more serious about anything in my life. I'd already crossed the point of no return, already emotionally detached from this marriage, already started imagining what my life would look like on the other side of this, and there was no going back now. The week after I served Mia with the divorce papers was absolutely wild, a complete emotional roller coaster that confirmed every single reason why I'd made the right decision to leave. She went through every stage of grief and manipulation in rapid succession, crying and begging, 1 minute angry and accusatory the next, then back to desperate promises about how she'd change and be better, and we could fix this if I just gave her another chance. She called me at work multiple times a day until I had to block her number and tell her all communication needed to go through Lisa, my lawyer. She showed up at my office building once, trying to ambush me during lunch, causing a scene in the lobby that was embarrassing for both of us. She sent long, rambling text messages at 2 in the morning about all the good times we had and how I was throwing away 7 years over nothing, completely missing the point that those 7 years had been slowly dying for at least the last 2, and she'd been the one killing them.
What really got to me was how Mia kept insisting she'd change, that she'd finally understood what she'd done wrong, that she'd be the partner I needed if I just withdrew the divorce papers and gave her one more chance.
But here's the thing about promises made under pressure. They're not real change. They're just panic responses from someone who's losing something they took for granted. I told her through Lisa that maybe she would change. Maybe this whole experience would be a wake-up call that made her a better person and a better partner. But that transformation wasn't going to happen with me, and I wasn't going to stick around to find out. I'd spent years trying to communicate what I needed, years being patient and accommodating and hoping things would improve, and she'd ignored all of it until the consequences became real. That's not love, that's just fear of losing convenience and comfort. The situation with Mia imploded in the most predictable way possible. About 2 weeks into the divorce process, Mia apparently had a massive fight with Claire. After Claire kept pushing her to stop begging me to come back and just embrace single life and independence, Mia finally snapped and told Claire that her advice had ruined her marriage, that she'd destroyed something good because she'd been listening to someone who was bitter and miserable about their own failed relationship. Claire fired back that Mia had made her own choices and was just looking for someone to blame instead of taking responsibility. And honestly, they were both right. Claire had absolutely been a toxic influence who filled Mia's head with one-sided anti-marriage propaganda. But Mia had been a willing participant who'd chosen to adopt that mindset instead of working on her actual relationship. They stopped being friends after that fight, and Mia tried to use that as proof to me that she was making changes and cutting out bad influences, but it was too little too late. I moved out of our apartment 6 weeks after serving the papers, found a decent one-bedroom place about 20 minutes away that was smaller but peaceful and entirely mine.
Bailey came with me, and that was one of the few things Mia didn't fight me on, because she knew she couldn't take care of him properly. And honestly, I think she knew he deserved better. The day I loaded up the moving truck with my stuff, Mia stood in the doorway, crying and asking me one more time if I was really doing this, if I really wanted to throw everything away. I looked at her and realized I didn't feel anger anymore, didn't feel resentment or bitterness, just this overwhelming sense of exhaustion and relief that it was almost over. I told her I wasn't throwing anything away, because there was nothing left to throw away, that she'd already dismantled our marriage piece by piece over the last 2 years, and I was just finally acknowledging reality. The divorce was finalized 3 months after I first served her the papers, quick and relatively clean. Since we didn't have major assets to fight over and no kids caught in the middle, Lisa handled everything professionally. We split our savings account 50-50. I kept my car and my retirement accounts. Mia kept her car and her stuff. We closed our joint credit card after paying off the balance. I heard through mutual friends that Valerie had started going to therapy after the divorce was final, actually working on herself and examining the patterns that had led to our marriage falling apart. Part of me was genuinely glad to hear that, because I never wanted her to suffer or fail. I just couldn't be the person she practiced growth on anymore. She'd taken 7 years of partnership and slowly turned it into a one-sided arrangement where I gave everything and got nothing back, and no amount of therapy could rebuild the trust and respect that had been completely destroyed. My life now is quieter but infinitely better. I come home to an apartment that stays clean because I am the only one living in it. I cook meals I actually enjoy without expecting someone else to show up and benefit from my effort. I take Bailey on long walks without having to coordinate with anyone or pick up someone else's slack. I've started dating casually. Nothing serious yet, but I'm in no rush. Just enjoying conversations with women who actually contribute and reciprocate and see partnership as a two-way street. Sometimes I think about those early years with Mia, when things were good, and wonder if there was a specific moment where it all started going wrong, some conversation or decision or turning point I missed. But mostly I've accepted that some people change in ways that make them incompatible with who you are. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for both of you is walk away. Mia might become a better partner for someone else someday after all this therapy and self-reflection, but that's not my responsibility anymore. And honestly, it's not my concern. I gave 7 years to someone who stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. And the moment I stopped providing that resource, she realized what she lost. But by then, it was already gone.